Welcome! This is the Jesan Sorrells audio experience. My name is Jesan Sorrells. Look, we are trying something different, so I want you to join us on the Jesan Sorrells Presents audio experience for interviews, for rants, for raves, for thoughts, for process, and you'll get a knee-deep, hip-deep, and ear-deep view inside of what I do. Look, if you like what you're listening to, please like me, please rank me, Stitcher, iTunes, Overcast, Google Play Music, everywhere where you get your groove on. I want you to give me a few stars. All right, now, let's head into the experience.
Oh, everything's going to be slow today? Of course everything's going to be slow today. Admit. Everything's going to be slow today. Ugh, it's going to be a thing.
Yeah, okay. Let's go.
Go for it. Continue your thought there.
Yeah. So we were just talking about your friend, Father
Chris.
Father Chris, who was talking about suffering. And I don't think we've done enough work in Protestant circles on a theology of suffering. I think it took Protestants a while to catch up on the issues of life. I think the Catholic Church was way out ahead of the whole life issue when it came to abortion and euthanasia. And Protestants got there, but we were playing catch up. I mean, and to be fair, the Catholic Church has a 1,500-year head start. So, there is that. But
Augustine and Aquinas and all those guys.
We had Jonathan Edwards. But again, give us another 1,000 years, okay?
You'll be fine.
We'll get there.
But they'll still have. But then it'll be like 2,500 years, and then I don't know what's going to happen at that point.
Who knows who the Catholics will have? It's great, but no, it's fine. But when it comes to a theology of suffering, to go back to that, I feel like in a lot of Protestant circles, there's a push to discount the value and the dignity that comes through suffering, and we want the miracle, right? We want the power of God. We want, and really, what we're doing is we're discounting the suffering of Christ in that moment. Like if we want to be like Christ, then we have to embrace the hardships that Christ embraced. Everybody wants to be like Jesus when there's when it comes to a miracle, right? Oh, I want 1,000 followers like Christ had. Like Christ had all these followers, but okay, well, do you want to go to the cross? Christ went to the cross, right? But everybody's out on that part of following Jesus, right?
Right.
And so, I appreciate what your former priest, Father Chris, is probably going to add to the discussion. I think he's going to have a lot of good things to say there.
I think he will too, and we're going to have him on an upcoming episode of the Jesan Sorrells audio experience podcast, such as it were. But today we want to welcome, with that rousing open, we want to welcome Brian Bagley. So, Brian, why don't you tell our listeners who you are and what you do? Let's start with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am currently the campus pastor for the Granbury campus at Stonewater Church. And Stonewater Church is a relatively new church. It was started about, I believe it was in 2005, was when two brothers, this kind of the senior pastor, Jeremy, and his brother, Joey, started out church planters right here in Granbury, Texas. And launched Stonewater Church, and it's grown over the last almost, I guess, 18 years, almost 20 years or so, to 5 campuses in the area, kind of in the immediate area. And I get the privilege of pastoring, helping to pastor the largest campus here in Granbury. One of the main things that I do is I'm in charge of kind of the spiritual health of the church, and so making sure we're good on doctrine and that we're following God's word and sticking to that. I do a lot of counseling and helping the people of the church overcome what we like to say that we get healthy, we develop spiritually by recognizing and repenting of sin, by replacing our lies with God's truth. And so that's everything that I do probably stems from that line of thought, or that purpose, I guess, if you will. So that's what I do here at Stonewater Church now.
Now, most people who listen to this podcast, either on the audio or who will be watching the video on YouTube a little bit later on, probably don't think too deeply about the path of how a person becomes either a pastor or a reverend or even a theologian. And I invited you on because I want to talk about that path. I also want to talk about theology and have maybe a little bit of a rousing discussion here about what systemic theology is versus other types of theological thinking. What exactly is a Calvinist? Because most people don't know what that is. And of course, where does a non-denominational church like Stonewater fit into the much larger context of, the Baptist, the overwhelming number of Baptist churches that are in the South. Yeah. And of course, because we live in the present, we have to contextualize this with the recent allegations, from the Southern Baptist Conference of sexual abuse inside of their conference, and the fact that Christians are often tarred and feathered. All Christian denominations are often tarred and feathered when one Christian denomination is revealed to have individuals in it that have feet of clay. So we're going to talk a lot about a lot of things on this podcast today. We're going to go deep, but let's kind of go back a little bit. I'm sure, Brian, you didn't wake up one morning at 8 years old and go, I'm going to be a pastor. That's what's going to happen. Although some people do. I had that thought that maybe I was going to do that. And then I discovered girls at 12. And so that went totally, completely off the rails in a whole lot of different ways. Yeah. But how did you wind up being in the place that you are at? Kind of lay out a little bit of your path for folks who are listening.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So I didn't, I didn't start out wanting to be in ministry. Matter of fact, I had someone, my grandma, when I was a kid, she told me, she said, and I can't remember exactly how she stated it, but I think she said, maybe you'll be, in her words, a man of God, something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, a man of God is just somebody who just loves God, just follows God. And we were real active growing up in the South. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and I think we were in church every day the doors were open. I don't know. It was a lot. But I was grateful for that. I grew up in a Christian environment. My parents were great people, honestly, still are to this day, and they're very active in their church. My dad was a deacon, and my mom just helped out in the church. She didn't have an office. She just would volunteer and help and teach Sunday school classes, or they were just a part of that community. And so I kind of grew up in this this very Baptist environment. It was very evangelistic, and so I can remember as a kid, we would go on I think Tuesdays. I can't remember. Maybe it's Mondays. I don't know. Anyway, we'd go knock on doors in neighborhoods, and we would hand out little gospel tracts and tell people about Christ. And sometimes people would be open to that, and they would receive Christ. And it was a different time, I think, back then in the 80s. Now I think when you knock on somebody's door in the 80s, everybody wants to know who that was. Everybody runs to the door and they're like, hey, and now you knock on somebody's door and it's a camera, right? They're like, who are you? What are you here for? And so I don't know. Instagram. I don't know what that is, but it's just a different culture now. But it was a very loving environment. I think it was very much a serving environment. And so I know a lot of people have hurts from the church, just like in anything. If whether it's government or law enforcement or medicine, there are always going to be bad actors, bad apples. And the church is comprised of people. And so going to be bad actors in everything. People get hurt in everything, and so I know you wanted to talk about a little bit about that later, but sort of my background was that was the context which I came in, and I remember my pastor one day was talking about baptism, and one of my friends got baptized, and I can't remember how old I was. I was young, elementary school, and I understood. I wasn't old enough to have all the answers to every theological concept and question, but I was old enough to understand the gospel, which is that we've all sinned. We're all sinners. I understood that. I mean, I've been in trouble with my parents before. I knew what that was, and that Christ, that all sin, no matter what, that is the payment for sin is death, according to scriptures and God's word, and I don't want that. I'm not interested in being separated from God. I want to follow God and love God. And so I prayed to receive Christ as my Lord and Savior, as it were. I said, hey, I agree with God that I'm a sinner, and that I want Him to be my Lord. And so at that age, I just I prayed with my dad, and my dad said, yeah, that's pretty much it. If you can admit that you need God, believe that He can help you, and agree with Him that He's God and you're not, that's the basic contours of faith anyway. Right. And we can fill in, we can go from there. And so as a young kid, I'd say probably 7 or 8, I was baptized as a believer, and I just kind of went on my way. And of course I didn't understand a lot of things. I think at some point in high school, I was exposed to pornography, ended up developing an addiction to pornography when I got to college, because when I got to college, there's this thing, I don't know if you remember, in 1995, this thing called the internet came out. And,
I first saw the internet in 1992.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It went mainstream.
It went mainstream. Yeah. I first saw Google in 1997.
Oh,
and I
my
remember
gosh.
thinking, this will have no impact on my life whatsoever. And I went outside and shot basketballs or whatever. And
little did we know.
Yeah, well, I should have gone back and kicked myself.
Yeah.
I should have been like, shut up. You need to invest 10 cents in Google stock.
Yeah. When it was like a 1/10 of a cent per share.
Exactly, yeah. When Yahoo couldn't figure out their business model or how they were going to make any money. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so I guess what happened there was I knew I needed help. I mean, at some point I woke up in the morning, I'm like, this is terrible. This is ruining my life. I knew this wasn't something that God wanted me to participate in. Yep. At that point I was in the military. Okay. And because I had gone to West Point to become a commissioned officer in the Army. I finished. I knew I was in trouble when I was there. It wasn't until I had gotten out, and I would have moments of sobriety, as spurts of sobriety, but I couldn't establish lasting sobriety in that fight. And it wasn't until I remember I was actually in Iraq, my first deployment, and the chaplain, I was going to chapel there. Whenever, once a week or so. And I remember that the chaplain would always do the Lord's Supper. He'd always give us communion. And he would always say, and he was just quoting scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 11 there. And he said, if there's any sin in your life that you've not confessed to God, that you've not really trusted Him with, then I want to urge you to just abstain from communion today, and let the elements go. And then I think his words were, don't take the supper of God in an unworthy manner, I think is how he put it.
Okay.
And I heard that multiple times, over and over and over. And then finally it hit me what he was talking about. Like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, I don't know. I don't really know if I believe God can help me with this. And that's when I thought, I've not trusted God with this struggle. Like I've been trying to do it on my own strength and not rely on God's strength in this. And I remember I let the elements go. I just let them, for the first time in my life. I did not partake in the Lord's Supper. I let the elements go. And I said, God, I don't want to do this in an unworthy manner. I want you, I need your help. I want you to help me with this. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how you're going to help me get sober here, Lord, but I'm going to confess that you're God and I can't do this without you. I want to be free. Please help me. And I was just having emotional, I remember I was just crying right there in the middle of that tent in the desert. Everybody was looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? Did his buddy just die? Yeah. Did his buddies just die? Like, what's going on? I mean, but I was just having a moment with God anyway. That was the process. Really, that began the process of walking out sobriety in my life going forward. And I remember that was sort of the moment. That wasn't the moment that I don't believe I gave my life to Christ, but I believe that was a watershed moment in my life about understanding what it means to follow Christ, what it means to give everything to him. And so like that sort of began a journey for me at that point. I remember I came back from the military. I came back from that deployment back to Fort Hood. I went back to Iraq again. And I sensed in my spirit that there was just something else that God wanted me to do. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. Ministry wasn't even a thought on my mind. I just knew I knew from this and some things. I was married at this time. My wife was at Fort Hood. She had a couple of kids. We had a couple of kids, and so we were. But she was home with them, and I remember just coming home one day after that second deployment, and looking at her, looking at them, and I just knew there was something else. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was time to go. I knew our time in the military had come to an end, and so. So surprised everyone and turned in my resignation. And that was its own kind of struggle.
I'm sure that was fun and exciting for everybody involved.
Yeah. I mean, my boss, my supervisor at the time was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're like, he didn't want me to go. But I knew it was the right call. Rebecca, my wife, knew it was the right call. So we did that. But so then I got out. We moved to Houston, Texas, relocated, and I took a job working at an oil field company there. And I was refurbishing offshore oil wells. So they would pull these oil wells that had been subsea for 20 years. They'd send them to Houston, and I would had a team of engineers. We'd look at them and decide if we could salvage them. If we could, we would. If we couldn't, we told them they had to buy a new one.
Yep.
And they didn't like us when we told them they had to buy a new one, but it was what it was.
Right.
So
it is what it is.
Yeah. So I did that for a few years. Again, but that uneasy spirit kind of never went away. And so my thought was, when we moved to Houston, I was like, okay, well, my time will be my own. I'll be able to dedicate time to whatever. Like if I want to get involved in local politics, I can do it in Houston. If I want to be more involved in my church, I don't have to worry about deployments anymore. I'm working for a small company there in town. I'm way more flexible. So maybe the Lord's just telling me I need to be more flexible. And so we did that for about 3 years. So let's see, got to Houston in 2007. In 2010, that feeling just never went away. It never went away. I felt like there was something more the Lord wanted me to do. My pastor at the time was an incredible man who I still think so highly of. His name is Mark Howell. He was our pastor at our church in Houston. We were attending there. And he just had this uncanny ability of helping people to respond to God. I don't know any other way to say it. And to hear God and respond to him. And I don't know that I would be where I am today without the ministry of Brother Mark Howell. But anyway, all that to say, he just brought up the thought, planted a seed in my mind, like, hey, have you thought about ministry? And I was like, I mean, I've thought about it, not for me personally. I've thought about it for you and a lot of other people.
Sure,
but,
sure.
Yeah, I
Everybody
mean, I've
else
thought about ministry.
is fine,
Yeah,
but
yeah. And so he said, "Well, hey, let's just pray about it." And I tried to fight it. I didn't want to do that. I thought, man, that's going to be really hard. Why would I do that?
Right.
And subject my family to that. And it's completely different life. And but anyway, long story short, he just continued with his mentorship and continued praying. I remember one day I was in my closet and I was reading in, I believe it's Isaiah chapter 6, where the prophet Isaiah is he's praying and he has a vision with the Lord, and he says, "Woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips."
Yep.
And he says, "I am undone." Right, and then the angel cleanses him. The cherubim gets the coal, cleanses him, cleanses his mouth, cleanses him with that coal, and then the Lord says, "Who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I, Lord, send me." And I remember reading that in the context of all these conversations that we've been having with this pastor, and these other struggles I've been having with work now for, let's see, probably my first thought probably happened in like 2006. And here we are 5 years later, 2011. And I read those words in the context of all of that's going on. And I just have a moment. I know I'm crying, I'm weeping before the Lord. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you got it. What do we need to do at this point? And so that started the journey. That's how we quit our job. I quit my job there. And then went to seminary in Fort Worth, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary there, got my master's degree, just started serving in local churches in the Fort Worth area. And then was approached by one of the brothers, Joey White from Stonewater, that we talked about earlier, starting a church. And he invited me to come help him with a campus they were planting in Weatherford. And so that's how I came to the church. I knew Joey from other connections. We had met through those connections. So that's how I got connected to that church. But
Yep.
So here we are.
So that is a 20-year journey in 15 minutes. So that's pretty good. That's and that provides, context. I mean, so you did 2 tours in Iraq, I presume 2001 to like 2003, probably.
Yeah. So the first one actually, so I was supposed to go to Iraq when it first kicked off. Our division stood down. We were all ready to go. Then they stood us down. That we didn't go. So the 1st Cavalry Division was, honestly, in the military world, it's kind of like a slap in the face if other people get to go play and you don't. And I remember it kind of hurt our pride a little bit that some of these lesser divisions, right? Because everybody's not as good as you are, right?
Everybody's not as good as
you are. But we got stood up. So we didn't actually go. So what happened was I was stop lost, right? When the Iraq War started.
Yep.
And then once it became clear we were not going to go, then they removed the stop loss. They sent all the eligible officers, captains, at this point I was a captain, sent us to the captain's career course. And then we ended up at Fort Hood. From Fort Hood I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Then when I was at Fort Bragg in 2005, that was that was my first tour, was out of Fort Bragg, and then came back for about 6 months and then went back in 2006.
Okay. All right. So so you were there just before the surge and Ramadi.
Yes.
And all of that nonsense that Jocko and Jocko Willick and Tim Kennedy were all involved in, and all those boys that all talk about all of that. Okay. And a good buddy of mine was in Afghanistan in 2001 and did 2 tours, and then another buddy of mine went to Iraq twice and went to Afghanistan once. So and we're all, if you're in between the ages of like 42 and like 57, and you were in the military. You
Yeah.
you went to go play in the sand. You went to go
That's
play
right.
tag with people in the desert.
That's right. That's right.
Somebody else put it. who's a combat vet as well, which is interesting in light of everything that's happening geopolitically. And I'm not going to go down this road at all. Just going to point it as an interesting thing. It's interesting to see that in light of everything that's happening geopolitically with the Russians in the Ukraine right now, where the last battalion commander they had that was worth any good was in Chechnya 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And, say what you want. And I've said this before in other podcasts and other contexts and to other people, but it's true. One of the silver linings out of the dark cloud of the last 20 years of war making that we have been engaged in is we actually have people like yourself who actually understand what it means to have a bullet zip past their head.
Yeah.
And kind of command people in that role. And that is it's hard-won, valuable experience that you only get in a place like Iraq or Afghanistan. So I'm going to say the typical thing, thank you for your service.
Oh, hey.
And then we're
Thanks.
Thanks
for paying your taxes.
You're welcome. Exactly. And now we can move on. All right.
It's greatness. It's greatness.
Okay, so a lot of things there. You mentioned the watershed moments. You mentioned the getting connected with Christ, and many people who, again, I have people of all persuasions that listen to this podcast. They're kind of all over the map, right? And so when people think about a walk towards Christ, they very much think about, hey, you're born into it. Hey, this is set for you, or something traumatic has to happen to you, and then like you go to prison or you're on drugs or something like that, and then or abuse happens to you or some sort of trauma, and then you make this turn from the secular world to this other thing called Christ. That doesn't match up with anything biblically, but it is what people think.
Right.
And are there people within the Bible who had their minds changed because of trauma and because of things that happened to them? Absolutely, for sure.
Of course, yeah.
But fundamentally, and this is now a theological question. Now we're going to get into theology a little bit here.
Yep.
Fundamentally, the theology of belief. Let's start with that. How do people in general, in your experience, come to belief? And I'm sure you've seen multiple paths, so it's probably hard to distill it down into kind of one idea. But actually, I'll make it a simpler question than that. When people come to belief, how do you, as a pastor in your role, undo or help them undo, along with the Bible, inappropriate or just not biblical, unbiblical, I'll use that word, unbiblical ideology, unbiblical theology, which might be ideology, but unbiblical theology in their brain? How do you help them walk through that? Because you've got to be dealing with that all the time.
Yeah. So, So when people come to Christ, so the Bible helps us again, and I can't. I'm just going to speak to the Bible.
Yeah, speak to the Bible.
Yeah. So God's word says that apart from Christ, we can do nothing. We can't know anything really apart from Him. Like Jesus makes some very important claims about Himself. He claims in John 14:6 to be the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. And so Jesus, because He makes these very specific claims about Himself, we can't reduce Him to a good person. We can't reduce Him to just a wise sage or a prophet. Like He claimed to be the Son of God. And so because of that, we can't even know Him apart from His help.
By the way, that is a massive truth claim that I want to just, before you go for much further, I want to stick on that for just a second, because I believe fundamentally that massive truth claim is fundamentally what separates Christians from everybody else. It also creates massive responsibility on a Christian to follow Jesus and to follow in that path. We opened up talking about suffering. Suffering is part of that. It also creates, as Paul would say, a stumbling block for the Greeks. And blindness for the Jews. And so there are other people of the book floating around, of other books floating around in the world, for whom that massive truth claim, and I'm not thinking about the atheists or the secular agnostics or any of those folks now,
Yeah.
Forget them for just a second. They're over there.
Mhm.
For the other people of the quote unquote book, the other big two, Islam
Yeah.
and Judaism,
Yeah.
it creates a stumbling block. That truth claim, they can't get past.
Right.
And that makes Christianity, in my opinion, the most revolutionary set of religious beliefs on the planet, period, full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So, religion is man's attempt to get to God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whatever that is. So, and that could take any form. I mean, for Buddhism, it's the Eightfold Path. For Islam, it's the five pillars of Islam. Like, for any religion, it doesn't matter.
The Tao.
And even what's interesting, I don't know if you've read any of Joseph Bottom's work. Joseph Bottom's is a Catholic thinker, but he even talks about the religious nature of secular ideologies. And so he says even like racism or environmentalism or socialism, like pick your ism. Each one of those has a religious form. In other words, there's an original sin, there's a way of atonement, there's a way of sanctification, and there's an eschatology. There's a way that the world is going to end, and even possibly a timeline, right? For that world destruction, if we don't go the way of atonement and the way of justification, according to that ism, right?
Well, yeah, because those isms are seeking to address something that
right.
hard materialistic scientific Nietzschean thinking, which infects the West, cannot address.
Right.
It serves to address all of those things that exist outside of the idea of how biology works or outside of the concepts of how your iPhone works. There's a whole bunch of things that are outside of that, that hard scientificism, which we are all enraptured to now. It's the new form of idolism, but we'll leave that aside for just idolatry. We'll leave that aside for just a second. There's all kinds of things outside of that cannot be addressed. Yeah. And so we've got to put those isms because, of course, we've created a vacuum by removing God from, removing God from the public square. But anyway, go ahead.
So you have this mass, like you said, a massive truth claim. So Jesus is saying, so you have to deal with Jesus at some point. You have to wrestle with who God claims to be. And so that's the starting presupposition. Either Christ is who he says he is, and then we move forward from there, or Christ is not. And then you can go any of these other ways. They're all basically the same. I mean, different. They're I'm not different paths, but they get to the same place. Okay.
Yeah.
So
it might have been the same clearing at the end of the path.
Yes. So, you don't have to have it all figured out. Like you in order to come to Christ, like there's another misconception that I think a lot of folks have, that I talk to from time to time, and they say, well, I'll come to Christianity, I'll come to church, or I'll come to Christ when I get my life in order. When I stop doing such and such behavior that they perceive in their mind is unchristian or something. And so what I say to those brothers and sisters is I say, hey, you don't come to Christ when you get your problem solved. You come to Christ, and it's in that relationship with Christ that your problems are solved. So think about, oh goodness, I believe it's Luke. Is it Luke 14? I can't remember exactly where the parable is, but it's
I've got a copy of the book here.
Not the parable, but the story about Jesus and the lepers. That Jesus heals the 10 lepers. Right?
Yes.
And so he says, "Go and show yourselves to the priest."
Correct.
Right. Well, so those lepers are in a leper colony. They're all by themselves. And they're bold enough. They see Christ. They know the claims that he's making, and they hear what people are saying about him, and they're bold, and they just boldly reach out to him and say, "Jesus, have mercy on us, heal us." Right. And Jesus says, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." Now, you don't go and show yourself to the priest until you're healed.
Right.
And they are not healed.
Right.
Okay. But the Bible records that as they were going on their way, they were healed.
Right.
In other words, the healing occurred in the journey, like in the process of obeying God, obeying Christ.
Right.
And at some point they look down on their journey and they're like, oh my gosh, we're healed, right? And then one of them, of course the Bible records one of them, only one of them, a Samaritan no less, turns around and comes back and thanks God, thanks, gratitude, loves, demonstrates love for Jesus. And so but I think there's
where's the other 10? They must have
the other 9,
where's the other 9?
I think but there's some truth in that, right? So Jesus says in John 14:21, he says, whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him. So that when we obey God, when we follow him, when we carry out the commands in this book here, right? When we live that, there's intimacy with God, and it's in intimacy with God that our broken places are healed, that our hearts are renewed, our minds are transformed into the likeness of Christ. And so I would say that faith, you don't have to come to God with all the faith in the world. Like, you just need a little bit of faith. Like, just a Bible records a mustard seed, right? Which is this tiny little,
it's very small
piece of organic material, right? A mustard seed, right? Here you go. And that's all that's required, right? You come to him with a little bit of faith and trust, and then you walk with Christ, you walk that out. And so, there's a lot of misconceptions about that. And but it's, I would say it's common. It's common to think that. It's common to think that God can't help you. You're too far gone or whatever. And that's just simply not the case.
I am a big fan of the Book of John. Book of John doesn't get quoted from a lot, or gets contextualized in other books. And it's interesting, all of the New Testament writers, if you actually go and read the New Testament, and you actually, read it, if you can get it, in the original Greek, or even if you have a concordance where you can go and look up words. I'm that guy. I got to go look up words because I got to know the meaning of the thing that's working like 12 levels down, right? And 12 levels up, because I'm that person. Okay. The Book of John. I was actually thinking about this yesterday in light of a different kind of book. But John 9, where Jesus cures the blind man, 1 through 41, where Jesus cures the blind man, right?
Yes.
And this is kind of what happens with new believers, right? So Jesus cures the blind man. His disciples ask him a great question at the beginning of John 9, was this man born blind? Or not, was this man born blind, but did this man sin, or did this man's parents sin? And Jesus says, neither one of them sinned, which is kind of a slap to the disciples, because, he's basically telling them, you don't understand how sin actually works. Congratulations. Let me educate you.
Yeah.
And says to them, he was born in this way so that the glory of God can basically be shown in the world through my healing, which is an incredible truth statement to make.
Man.
And it operates at a psychological, emotional, sociological, religious, cultural. It operates at physical. It operates at so many different levels there.
Yeah.
He heals the man. For those of you who haven't read it, go read John 9, 1 through 41. But anyway, he heals the man. And I won't say go into how he heals him. Just go read it. He heals him, basically. Heals him of his blindness. And the man goes back to the synagogue. He goes back to the religious structure. And this, for me, is the most striking thing. Because he goes back to the religious structure, and the Jewish religious structure then proceeds to condemn him because of his healing, because of the fact that he was healed. And even his parents abandon him. They say he can speak for himself. He's of age. He can defend himself, because they were afraid of being kicked out of the religious structure, because the cultural structure was the thing that they had. And of course, they ask the blind man, the religious structure does, they ask the blind man, or the rabbis ask the blind man, or formerly blind man, is this man who just healed you basically a sinner? Going back to this idea of sin again, which again I think is compounding. And the blind man, or the formerly blind man, says, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. all I know is, this is great. All I know is, once I was blind, but now I see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I kind of got turned on to this story, not necessarily through reading the Bible. I got turned on to this story through Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull, where he opens up with that, with Robert De Niro as the boxer Jake LaMotta doing his footwork, and he kind of puts the Book of John over that, and then of course that sets the template for the rest of Jake LaMotta's nonsense in that movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's okay, it's fine. Martin Scorsese's deeply Catholic, and deeply Italian, which kind of go, both those things kind of go along together.
Yeah.
And it is this idea, and again, it's operating at multiple levels, right? This idea of suffering, this idea of being born into something that you did not control, the world, right?
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes along and redeems you, heals you. And then here's what happens. Because you've now gone against the world and you have gotten healed and you've gotten yourself in order, you've gotten yourself aligned with the highest ideal. Mm-hmm. Now these corrupt structures are going to judge you. Mm-hmm. When new believers come to the faith, what is the number one struggle that they have once they've been baptized and they've said the words and they've had I love the term you used before, watershed moment? What's the number one struggle they have after that?
Yeah,
in your experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. Generally, again, depending on the context, it can go one of two ways. I would say, if they struggle, some people enter into a period of rapid growth. Okay, so think of like a seed that comes up out of the ground, and it's just, man, that thing is hungry and it just wants to eat all the time, right? I mean, it's just like hungry, like a newborn baby or like a small animal, right? That thing wants to eat, its insatiable appetite. And so so there is that, right? And sometimes it's just hard to get the right food. There's so much content out there. Some of it is not good at all. Some of it is poison. And so I think that's one struggle, one danger. Another is, depending on the if you're in a home or in some sort of environment where you're surrounded by people who are opposed to that worldview, that understanding of reality, the Christian understanding of reality, you're going to get a lot of pushback, and that can be discouraging for some people. Like it can cause you to did I make the right decision? Did I understand this correctly? And it raises doubts in your mind. And again, there's nothing wrong with doubts. But the question is, what do we do with our doubts? Where do we go to address doubt? Same thing with fear. Fear is not a bad thing. It's what do I do with my fear? It's the same thing with anger. All these emotions that we feel, emotions are they're kind of like our kids. Okay, like we're glad they're here. They're helpful. They can tell us some things. They can tell us when things are wrong, but they don't make major decisions for us.
Right.
They don't tell us where to go or what to do. And when they do that, when we put our emotions in that position to do that, that's when we end up in the ditch. That's when we do things that we're like, wish I could have that back. So I would say those are kind of the two major things. I mean, consuming things that are not helpful end up being actually maybe even destructive potentially, and then discouragement, people trying to come in and sow doubts into the decisions you've just made, connections you've just made.
Yeah, and trying to throw you out of throw you out of the superstructure because they don't understand your worldview anymore.
Yeah, yep.
And the first one I would reference, or I would think of, the parable that Jesus told about, some seed falling on rocky ground, and some seed being eaten up, and then very few seeds wind up being planted. The Christian walk has always been one that is a narrow road. No matter what time in history and no matter what country in history, it's always been a narrow road. Christians have always really been the minority. And I think one of the things that American Christians in particular are struggling with right now is the transition of this culture from being one that was, how can I frame this? It was multi-ethnic, multiracial. It is multi-ethnic, multiracial, but with a nominal nod to Christianity.
Yeah.
Transitioning to, quite frankly, and you and I have talked about this offline in other kinds of conversations, but I'm going to mention it now publicly because I think, what the heck, why not? Firmly encased in a pagan culture and has almost completely shed the skin of Christianity.
Yeah.
That's really tough for American Christians to hear, particularly American Christians of a particular age and social status, where their Christianity has been the skin that has allowed them to get social status, or has been nodded to, or maybe it wasn't even something they necessarily had to think too hard about. I think over the next 20 to 30 years in this country, these are probably going to be the most critical next 20 or 30 years in culture. And Doug Wilson has been talking about this, particularly in America, because we can either be a shining city on a hill with gates all around, both geographic and otherwise, or we can just be one more global country in a bundle of pagan global countries. And I do believe that there are certain folks that would really like that because it works for them. And I believe that there are not enough other folks who are thinking about this, even remotely contextually. And then I think there are people who are going to be confused by what I just said.
Sure. Yeah.
When we think about the underpinnings of American Christianity, if I'm starting out, what are some good places for me to start, right? You mentioned Jonathan Edwards. I doubt many people know who Jonathan Edwards is. I like Matthew Henry in particular, but that's another thing over there. We're talking like, really old. I'm talking really old school guys anyway. I've also become a big fan of R.C. Sproul. From back in the day. Doug Wilson, I just mentioned his name. Who are maybe some people, if I'm a young Christian, if I'm just starting out on this game, or if I have been on this game for a while and I think I know everything, but I need to get my stuff straightened out. Who are some good theologians to look at?
Yeah. So what's remarkable about what you just said is there's almost an earthquake going on in Christianity at the moment. And so there are some names that probably 5 years I would have recommended to you that I wouldn't recommend to you right now.
Oh yeah. Things are getting restructured left and right.
Yeah. And so I believe that there's a sifting. I mean, I think you can just look at our culture in general, and I don't believe you have to be a Christian or a religious person by nature and just say there's a sifting taking place in our nation. There's things are being separated out, and it's not getting more integrated. It's getting more separated.
More fractured. Yeah.
And in so many ways. And so, but what's happening in that sifting process is areas where there were no disagreement, like those disagreements are now being brought to the surface now.
And by the way,
I'll go back to go ahead
before you finish your sentence. I want to contextualize this. We're contextualize this in the light of, we're talking about this not just in the context of the broad context of American Christianity being sifted. We're also talking about this in May of 2022 when the Southern Baptist Convention is getting sifted. And Russell Moore and and Albert Mohler are having their moments of truth right now. So anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted your sentence. Go ahead.
You're good. That's great context. And so, but before I move on, I want to go back and just kind of give a little bit of, I want to throw in a nugget of hope to anybody who may be listening here. So what's interesting about sort of this post-Christian world that we may be living in or entering into is they're not just burning down Christianity. I mean, they really are talking about burning down society, like burn it all down, right?
Oh yeah.
The thing about and in many ways they have secularism has burned down the house already. And like we can't even let me give you some examples. We can't even define what a woman is anymore. And in fact, men are now winning Woman of the Year, right? I mean, you've got all of
the
these
Babylon Bee anyway.
Yeah.
But then that leads to Twitter takeovers by Elon Musk.
Right. Well, and so but you have these kind of the center that held everything together has crumbled. Okay.
W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming, the center cannot hold.
Yeah.
But you know what? Joan Didion was saying that back in like the 1960s. Like she was warning that there was some weirdness coming out of California that people needed to pay attention to. But the center held for a long time. That's what Didion didn't understand. It was fraying at the edges.
Yes.
But now the rot is like all the way down to your local meth problem in your white collar, or not white collar, in your blue collar white people community in rural America. Yes. That's the center. That held for years. Yes. That's now broken apart.
Yeah. So the good thing about this is that this gets to my moment of my nugget of encouragement. Is that in the ruins, like we have the opportunity to rebuild something now, and instead of having it based on some form of nostalgia, because I think a lot of people, right, they think about the way things used to be. Oh, if we could go back to the way things were in the 1800s, man, that was a great time to be alive, or in the Victorian age, or in the pick your time, right, that you reflect on and go, that's what it should be like, right? Like those eras had their problems, significant challenges and problems.
Particularly if you look like me. Like, I don't want to go back to the 1950s.
Yeah,
zero interest in any of that.
Or any period of time in human history. Nobody. We have the luxury of being able to look back on history and at any given moment, and we can stand in judgment of what they did wrong, but we're so blind to the things that we're getting wrong, right?
Yeah.
And we think we know, and we're just as lost as a goose as they are. Okay. And so anyway, all that to say, like, man, what a great opportunity to live. Like, let's build Christian faith. Let's build a denomination that doesn't make the mistakes of the past. Understand, like, we're humble enough to understand that we may make mistakes. We will make mistakes. By God's grace. We won't, and we won't take any credit for that, because we can't take any credit for God's righteousness. But anyway, all that to say, what was your question?
Yeah.
I gave you negative truth or negative encouragement.
Negative truth. No. No, I'm glad you gave me the negative truth. Sorry, gave us the negative truth, because sometimes these conversations between Christians can get to be a real downer, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, and it's not just Christians, it's also secularists as well.
Right.
Are hidebound. The conservative commentator Eric Erickson, who infamously came up with the idea of "you will be made to care," which I think has been proven out to be true, has said or wrote a blog post years ago for when he formerly wrote for Red State, when that thing was still going. And basically he made this point, which I think is an incredibly trenchant observation. He said both political progressives and political conservatives are hidebound to the 1950s. Political conservatives are hidebound to the 1950s because men were men, women were women, minorities, weren't yelling too loudly, and the culture seemed to be more cohesive, right? Christianity seemed to be the tie that bound. Dwight Eisenhower or Harry Truman might have said the N-word, but nobody in the media was reporting it, right?
Right.
And progressives are hidebound to the 1950s because there was a 39% top tax rate. There were from their perspective, no billionaires. As a matter of fact, Delano Roosevelt said there would be no wartime billionaires during World War II, and that held true pretty much all the way through Eisenhower. And Kennedy was the first one that came along and was like, 39% top corporate tax rate, get out of town. And he reduced it to 34%.
Yeah.
And then the next person to
Yeah.
reduce it down even further than that was Ronald Reagan. And then the next
Yeah.
person to reduce it down after that was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah.
there you go. But progressives are hidebound to that vision of the 1950s
Yes.
of the corporations and the rich, the evil rich, quote unquote, paying their fair share. And the
Yes.
point he was making in this was that we can't go back to the 1950s.
That's
We have
right.
to move forward from a different vision.
That's right.
Now, he's part of the Presbyterian. He's part of the presbyters over there. So the Presbyterians have their own problems.
Yeah. Yes.
Just like the Episcopalians are, the Southern Baptists, everybody's having their own problems.
Yes.
And I think what he missed in that analysis was this idea that you have come to of sifting. And so the question that I had, or to reiterate the question, the first part of it, because you answered the second part of it by giving us hope, but in looking for that hope, who do you recommend we read? Who do you recommend we look at that maybe you wouldn't have recommended 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I would say Doug Wilson is somebody that I've listened to some. Now Doug I will say this, Doug kind of has a reputation for being a provocateur. Okay,
He's a bomb thrower.
Yeah. Now I will say this. Doug has, I think, a kind of a different role to play, if you will, in this discussion. So Doug is and I love Doug. I think he says a lot of great things, and I don't for a second doubt his motives at all. And
I think at the end
wonderful.
in the Judgment Era, he'll be there right along with
yes,
what's his name?
I really do.
I think him and David French will both be there. They'll both be shocked to see that they both made it.
Yes, I believe that's true. But
Much
one
to
thing
both of their chagrin.
yes. There's no love lost there, by the way, at all.
No, but the thing is, like, Jesus is gonna be like, you gotta hug, because we gotta deal with this other problem over here.
Yeah. So I feel like that the one thing that Doug brings to the table is a very sober analysis of what we're really up against,
Right.
In terms of who the enemy is, and what the cultural arguments are that are being made, and how to move the needle back in the other direction. Because the secular progressives again have, they've destroyed the institutions. Family has been redefined. Family, the current definition, we can't even define a family. When we can't define, marriage has been completely redefined from what Scripture says it is. Genders have been completely redefined. Every place you could possibly introduce confusion has been introduced.
Right? Between men and women, even. One of the arcs that we've been on in the last few episodes of this podcast is looking at fatherhood.
Yeah.
And we are now 2 days in Texas away from, or no, not even 2 days. We're a day after, the school shooting down in San Antonio, and the school shooter. And let me go on record: the school shooter was wrong. Let me go on record in saying that. That seems to be clear. He was satanic. I'm going to go a step further in his motives. Evil, right? I'm going to use that word.
We can use that moral category here.
Yeah, demonic. I'll use that word too,
yes.
right? And the secular progressives seem to have no answer to solve the problem of the pathologies that their fully realized policies at a political, social, and cultural level have created. They have no answer for it, which is why, anyway, it's the reason why they're doing a number of other things in a number of different areas, because they have no answer. And the thing that stands out, just like every other school shooter going back to Paducah, Kentucky in the 1990s, which most people forget about, every school shooter, even the Columbine boys, every school shooter, either zero or nominal presence of a grown man in the household. Being a father. I don't mean a grown man hanging around and abusing people, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a man who is being a dad.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can argue with me all day if you want. It doesn't matter. You can go back and look at the history. Just look at the
Yeah.
record. The record stands as it is. And that's
Yep.
that's pathology that no one wants to address,
Yeah.
because then you might have to address feminism directly or some other things that are happening in society, that have happened in society and culture. But
Yeah.
anyway, you're right. So he's addressing, Wilson is
Yeah.
addressing sort of where those fracture lines are, and
Right.
how where our mindset has to be in order to get there. Okay.
Yeah, and so
Or to fix
another
it.
reason I bring up that his provocateur role is because I feel like it overshadows a lot of other things that he's added to the conversation that are not provocative at all. They're actually very helpful. So I read a book of his recently called Productivity.
Mhm.
Okay, and it's a book about productivity, but it's his title is saying, sometimes we get caught up in well, I haven't conquered the world yet, so I'm a
Right.
failure, right? I didn't get anything. And what his point is, like, you plod along, just you take the next step. You take what's the next step? That's how. And then after taking the next step, you look back, and in 10 years, you're like, man, I got all this done. Like all these things have been accomplished. And anyway, he makes a point in there that I thought was really poignant, and it actually kind of overlaps with what the sort of the gun control debate that's been reignited.
Yeah.
But he's talking about productivity, and he talks about media.
Mhm.
And he says, in our culture, we talk about media as if it's movies, social media, and podcasts.
Mhm.
Okay. But he said media is actually anything that is used to communicate. Anything.
Yes.
So air molecules that vibrate over my vocal cords, that's a form of media. My face is a form of media. A carrier pigeon is a form of media, right? Like media is anything. And so what we've done, and media helps us be more productive, okay, is media is the means through which we are productive. And so what happens is we have all this technology and all these advances, and here comes all of these new forms of communication, all of these new ways to be productive, and yet our hearts are so perverse. Like, we'll take that media and we'll find a way to pervert it, and then in our way of trying to deal with that perversion that we see, we'll take that social media, and I've done this, and this is what got me. I'll say I can't handle my social media, so I'm just going to go and put it on the shelf. I'm going to delete the app, right? And so, well, what have I done? Rather than addressing the perversion of my own heart's tendencies to pervert the media, I'll just take the media and treat the media as if the problem, and what I'm doing is I'm limiting my own productivity by not addressing my own sinfulness, my own brokenness with regards to the media itself. I don't make any progress. I actually take a step back in my own productivity. And it's the same thing with gun laws, right? The gun is the weapon is an inanimate object. It's a thing. It's the human heart that takes that weapon, a gun in this case, a knife, a car, a whatever. It's that thing. It's that human heart that perverts that utility, that weapon, and causes destruction with it. And so our tendency then is to say, you know what, let's take away that. Let's not deal with the real human heart issue. Let's resolve the sin. Let's resolve the brokenness. And so, like, I tell you what, I read that book and I was like, Lord, I need help. Like, I need your help with social media, because I know you're calling me to be productive. I know you're calling me to accomplish things in my life, but Lord, I need help dealing with my own heart on this issue. So anyway,
that's amazing. And I'm going to have to think about that, because I put the social media on the shelf for sure. Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
I spent 8 years in Twitter.
Yeah.
And it didn't change a darn thing.
Yeah.
I changed, but Twitter didn't change. Twitter,
right.
Well, I won't say Twitter didn't change. Twitter got worse. Twitter got worse in 8 years, for sure.
Right.
And I liked, well, and I think the other dynamic is, and I don't know if Doug talks about this in his book at all. I may have to pick that up. Productivity. That's actually a pretty good title. I admire that. the manipulation of the algorithms in the back end to basically get you to do things. But that's still technology.
Yeah.
But the people fall in love with a certain form of media.
Yeah.
And it becomes an idol, right? And
That's right. Yep.
So for me, Twitter I wouldn't necessarily say it was an idol, but it was too much. And so at a certain point I was like, you know what? The idol has to go away.
Yeah, sure.
So I can deal with my heart.
Yeah.
Now occasionally back and forth, will I dip back in there? Sure. But for me, the transition was taking these idols, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, LinkedIn, and recognizing the moment when it switches over from being a tool to being an idol. Because there's a moment where it clicks over. Yep. This happens with email, where it clicks over to that thing, and when you recognize that moment, backing away from it, and having God help you. And for me, that's the calling of the Holy Spirit. You have to be in tune with the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit will warn you when that's a thing that's going to be.
Yeah, that's right.
I like that idea. I like that idea. Okay, so Doug Wilson. We'll look at Doug.
Yeah, Doug's good. Another one. I like a guy named Heath Lambert. So I deal in. Heath Lambert was the president of the Association of Certified Biblical Counselors, and he's written a lot of good things on understanding human nature, understanding what it means to follow God in a practical sense. Like, he's really good at helping the rubber meet the road, so to speak, in terms of like pastorally walking out your faith, and in many contexts, right? So whether it's like sexual sin or any sin, it doesn't matter. And so Heath is somebody that's been really good. I'm trying to think of another guy that has been really helpful. I actually read a lot of different books. So I would say Joseph Bottom has been helpful. Ken Sandy, Peacemaker, has been helpful. I'm just looking over here at my.
Yeah, I studied Ken Sandy in my conflict management practice.
Yeah.
When I went through grad school with him.
Okay.
Well, not with him, but I mean like with the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're just looking theology, I think A.W. Tozer is always going to be a good. It's always going to be a good kind of, and he's more modern. Yeah. Of course, C.S. Lewis. Lewis and Tozer, I think, were contemporaries. I think Tozer was a little bit younger than C.S. Lewis, but I would say that's I would say Nancy Pearcey. Anything by Nancy Pearcey is going to be really good. I wrote a book called Told Truth, really good to helping you understand what's happening in today's world. Kind of again, a biblical worldview kind of thing. That's good. That's pretty good. I think. I think that should get us going.
Yeah. No. And what I'll do is I'll put links to all those books in the player below the show notes, so you can go find them in the podcast. Yeah.
Heath Lambert wrote a book, Finally Free. He called. You can look at everything Heath Lambert has written is pretty good, in my personal opinion.
Awesome. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, because we have a few more minutes together. We've talked about a lot of interesting things here so far on the podcast, and again, I want to thank you for coming on and giving us your time and your perspective. And I would love to do this again, because we could talk for like 5 hours. There's things like unwind in my head.
Yeah.
Because one thing touches on another thing, politics being downstream from culture, and culture being downstream from belief. Yeah. Yes. And just sort of, we could pull that apart.
So if I can get back to it. So that's one of the reasons why I felt like, because when I realized in my journey into ministry, I thought, you know what, I can get involved in politics. And then I was like, well, politics isn't where the problem is. It's the culture. And then I realized there's all these culture wars going on. And then I was like, you know what? It really is about belief. It's about faith. It's about religion. And so all culture wars stem from misplaced religion,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the worship of something other than God leads to the pathologies of culture that manifest themselves in culture, um, and then which then turn around and manifest themselves in politics. And anyway, so that's
You mean
another reason
wait?
why I got involved in religion or in ministry.
You mean a president or a mayor won't save us? A governor?
Yeah, and neither will a march.
And a
Yeah,
march won't
a
save us?
march won't save you either.
Surely a summer of rioting will change things.
Yeah,
Surely.
yeah.
Okay. Um, I guess maybe I would end, or I would have us come to a close on this idea, or ask you this question.
Yeah.
In our own lives, one of the things on a podcast is you're supposed to leave people with a call to action, right? You're supposed to give them something to do, right, at the end of a podcast, if they make it that long.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure all tens and tens of our listeners will make it to the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, for those of us who are listening, what can we do? What is our call to action?
Yeah.
In 2022 and beyond, particularly if we are believers, if we believe in the truth claim of Christ, and if we believe in everything that goes along with that truth claim of Christ, if we are practically trying to walk the meaning of that out, if we are, as Dr. Jordan Peterson has so infamously said, if we are picking up our cross every day and walking up to the top of Golgotha with it.
Yeah.
What can we do to help you? What can we do to help, not necessarily Christianity, because God doesn't need our help. What can we do to help our families? I'll frame it this way: our families, our communities. What can we do to help the church, whether it's our local church or Stonewater? What can we do?
Yeah.
Is it a matter of putting our hands to the plow to actually work? Is it a matter of beating our well, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, beating our plows into swords, and it might be time for that. Or am I totally off the rocker? Like, what do we need to be doing?
No,
Praying,
I don't think you're off the rocker.
What do we need to be doing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, he talks about anxiety. We live in an anxious age. We live in a culture that is, in a world that is full of anxiety. It's anxious because it doesn't know what's true anymore.
Right.
It's forgotten what's true. And so when the mind can't hold on to truth, it just holds on to whatever it can, and then that has no foundation, and then it just shakes. And so that's one person. Now multiply that times billions of people, and you have an anxious world.
Right.
And so Jesus is talking in Matthew chapter 6 about anxiety. Well, actually, before that, he talks about prayer, which is an interesting study about the connection between prayer and anxiety. So you've got prayer on one hand, which is a conversation with God, and you've got anxiety, which is a conversation with yourself about the same topic. Okay. So anxiety is a meaningless conversation with yourself about things you can't control. Prayer is a conversation with somebody who cares and can actually do something about the scenario. And so, but then he goes on and he says, don't worry about tomorrow, what you'll eat, all those things. Don't worry about, God will provide for those things. And then he says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added unto you. So in other words, the things that are occupying your mind, whether it's, is my marriage going to make it? Are my kids going to grow up and ever leave my home? Is my job going to pan out? Right? Because most people don't think culture wars. They just think, how do I get through my day? Right. And if I can get through my day, then maybe I'll think about who I'm going to vote for. Right. Maybe I'll think about, am I going to go to church? And so what I tell people in marriage counseling all the time is like, if we can if we can pursue God, if we can deal with the sinful tendencies in our own hearts, and we can pursue the Lord and his kingdom and his righteousness, then my marriage is going to be okay. My kids are going to be okay. Now I can't determine, I can't make their choices for them, but in doing that, in pursuing the kingdom of God and his righteousness, in pursuit of those things, I'm going to be where I need to be in order to influence the world as best as I can. Again, I can't be responsible for the decisions other people make, but I can be responsible for myself. I can be responsible to God about the role that I need to play and he needs to play in my life, and that he's asking me to play in this world. And I think if we can obey God, for God, to God, then I think we're in a position to win. Okay. And success is not 1,000 followers on Instagram or Twitter. Success is faithful obedience to God, faithful in pursuit of him in our daily lives. And then all of those aggregate little one-off choices that people make for God in the aggregate, like all put together, man, though, that's when a society is transformed into a moral society. That's, and we're not legislating it. We're not guilt tripping people into righteousness because of some ideology, CRT or whatever it is you come up with. People are redeemed by God, chosen by God, loved by God, and pursuing God in that way. And then they're making righteous decisions with their neighbors. And so anyway, so I would say my word of encouragement would be to seek first the kingdom of God. If you know God, you've trusted Christ as your Savior, like pursue him wholeheartedly, like ask him to do like the psalmist says in Psalm 139, Lord, search my heart and see if there's any unclean way in me, examine me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Lord, I don't know if I'm going to follow you, God, that's still up in the air, but at least lead me in the way everlasting. Yeah. And I think if we can do that, if you don't know Christ, if you haven't taken that step of faith, I would encourage you to open your heart to the word of God, open up your heart to the possibility. And again, it doesn't take a ton of faith. You don't have to show up gangbusters and have all the answers. Like, it just takes a little bit of faith to trust God. All you're doing is admitting you need help, believing he can help you, and confessing, really, which is kind of a church word. It's a religious word for agreeing with God. Okay. When we confess, we say, I agree with you, God. Agree with him that he's God and you're not. And his ways are the right ways and not my ways or anybody else's ways. So.
And that's it. Thank you, Pastor Brian Bagley, Stonewater Church in Granbury, Texas, for coming on the Jesan Sorrells Audio Experience podcast today. Thank you for that appeal, and thank you for laying the words of Christ and the message of Christ on us and on our listeners today. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.